All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to our session today. My name is Steve Rothfeld. I'm a senior analytics specialist with AWS, and I have my technical counterpart here, Carlos Gallegos. He's a senior solutions architect in the analytics space as well. Both he and I focus on higher ed and our ed tech customers as well. And today we're going to be taking you through our presentation around how to revolutionize your pipeline, your data pipeline with a generative AI powered assistant. Now, I was here last year. I don't know, was there anyone here who was in my session last year when I showed the Gen AI capabilities that we put in our BI tool, Amazon QuickSight? Cool, because I'm going to show it again, and then we won't have any repeats here. So let's go through what our agenda is today. So today, for our session, our agenda really consists of four main topics. We're going to start off talking about the AWS data and AI stack. I'm also going to introduce Amazon Q to you in that discussion, that part of the discussion, which is our generative AI assistant. Then Carlos is going to take over. He's going to do all the hard stuff today. So he is going to talk to you about AWS Glue and how you can use our generative AI assistant Q to ETL your data. We're going to talk about how Amazon Redshift can be used with Q to generate SQL statements just using natural language. And then once we've kind of gone through how to normalize your data using AI, I'm going to show you some of the results, some of the things you can do as an end user in a BI tool with generative AI as well. And so one of the things, though, that Carlos and I have come to realize in having conversations with our customers, and just about every conversation we have these days goes right to generative AI. And it's because there's so many cool things you can do around it. And so when we talk to our customers, the initial conversations at least always focus on the end use case, right? What can we generate with generative AI? Dashboards, reports, music, videos, those types of things. And we get in some really interesting conversations. Inevitably, what happens is those conversations turn to, yeah, but my data's not ready for this, right? So how do we get our data ready to actually use generative AI in the way we really want to? And the question then becomes, well, can we use generative AI to get our data ready to do that? And the answer is yes. And so Amazon Q, as I mentioned to you when I was going over the agenda, that's Amazon's generative AI assistant. And so with Amazon Q, you can make your data much more accessible. You can write code. You can have it answer questions. You can even have it perform tasks for you. So, and the great thing about any product or service you use from AWS is that we always take security as job zero. So one of the main points we want to make while we're talking about Amazon Q is that any permissions that a user has in respects to data will be respected with Q as well. So if somebody doesn't have access to certain data sets, they won't with Q. So just want to make sure that everyone knew that about our security as well. It is something that we take very seriously. So, and going back to kind of some of the tenets that we use to build our AWS data and AI stack with security, again, always job zero. So all of our products and services here will be, the first thing is security. Ease of use is another tenet that we have, as well as price performance, and then of course, choice. We want to make sure that in this stack, we are actually connecting with the correct persona, right? Because if you look at up top here, our users who are probably going to want to use Amazon QuickSight or Q for the end products, that may not be, what an engineer and architect needs to get that stack, to get the data in that stack ready. So again, we have all of the different services within AWS to apply to the different use cases. And so we talked a little bit about some of the different use cases and some of the services. So what exactly can Amazon Q do? And I know I introduced that to you just a minute ago and talked a little bit about some of the things it can do. But with this slide, what we wanted to point out was some of the more specific use cases. And so, especially in the specialized roles, because what we're starting to see is some specialized, well, with Amazon Q in Connect, for instance, in Connect, if you don't know it, that is our call center data service. So our customers are starting to use Q live with customers so that when they're having that interaction, Q can come up with recommendations and services that'll help them in real time. Now, with Amazon Q for Business, you know, your internal employees can do knowledge search on your data, summarizations, extract insights. They can do research and analytics. And then, of course, we're going to talk about Amazon QuickSight in just a little bit after Carlos is done talking about Glue and Redshift. And then Amazon Q Developer. That's actually pretty interesting because with Amazon Q Developer, you can do a lot of things like writing code, security scanning, migration, troubleshooting. So one of the things that we really want, one of the points we really want to drive home is that we view generative AI as a way to assist humans with work, not replace them, right? So we are looking at accelerating all of these actions with within AWS. And so now we all know that data management has typically been a really complex and often manually intensive task. So we've made significant strides in developing Gen AI tools that will simplify the data management process by incorporating it into our services. So for the remainder of today of our presentation, we're actually going to focus on how Gen AI has been incorporated into our services to help get your data ready so that you can use generative AI in report writing and some of the other end user capabilities. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Carlos. He is going to take you through Glue and Redshift.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. So when we are talking about data management, I think we have an end-to-end strategy, right? So at the beginning, we start seeing how we can prepare that data before getting insights. And the first step is data integration. So when we are talking about data integration, it's all about data preparation, data quality, all the hard process that we need to make. And it's going to take a lot of time to make those transformations, to write in that code, to understand that data. Is one of the hardest process ever when we are talking about data, because when we are going to use that data, before that, we need to make sure that that data has a really high quality. So Amazon Q introduced a new feature with AWS Glue. But before that, what is data integration? So we have seen that for developers in the data journeys, it's going to take time to prepare all that data that all the Gen AI applications is needed, all the data that is necessary for all the Gen AI applications. So to write those transformations, to write those jobs, is going to be something not just about writing that code, but also to learn how to use that tool. So the beginning, that learning curve is going to take time. Then once you have that learning, you can start writing those jobs. And finally, you are making some deliver for all the business users. But it's going to take a lot of time. Nowadays, we have services like AWS Glue that can provide self-service capabilities. It's going to help you to write or to create those ETL jobs with a visual interface. So it could be something that could accelerate that process, but at the end, everything relies in the developer itself. So that's the person or the professional who knows how to do jobs, how to use that visual interface. And it's going to take time as well. Then we have really big teams about developers. And when we are talking about developers, all of them can use different tools. So then first they need to plan, they need to define all the steps before going and in real creating those jobs. And that is gonna take time as well. So we are talking about Q as a way that we can reduce that time, that accelerate that job to accelerate that time to market that we have, and to reduce the complexity that we are seeing in our jobs. So Amazon Q is just a new feature in AWS Glue. AWS Glue is a data integration service from AWS who is able to help you to write those jobs. But then Amazon Q will be that SME working by your side. It's going to help you not just writing code, but also defining, planning, troubleshooting, giving you some guidance, best practices. So it's going to help you in the full development journey that you have as a developer in the data journey. So the first thing is Amazon Q is able to define a plan for you. So you can ask Amazon Q, hey, I will need to create a job. I will need to create this process to get some insights. And that will be something that you have an Oracle database, an SQL Server database. We want to have an Student 360 view. How can I do that? So Amazon Q is able to recommend you not just the specific code, but the services, the architecture, the features that you will need, best practices, how will be the step-by-step plan that you need to fulfill that requirements. So it's able to help you with writing a plan to make all the development process. Then it's able to help you to write that code itself. So it's not just about the plan, it's also to giving you some of the best practices about coding, about the libraries that maybe there will be the best practices that you can do, maybe to writing that specific code that you needed, and also helping you with some troubleshooting in those jobs. So if you have an issue, you have an error, you have any problem with that, you can ask you as well for that. So let's see how it works. This is Amazon Q in AWS Glue. So for instance, if we want to write a code, let's see we have some data in a Amazon S3 repository, and we would like to join that data with a table in a relational, non-relational database like DynamoDB. We just need to use natural language. Like, hey, I want to read that file. I would like to make that join. I would like to have that kind of rules. And Q is going to provide you all the code that you needed. You need to use natural language in the interface. Then you can copy that code and paste in the job itself. So you don't need to write anything. Finally, you just need to put like a small details, like the username and password, the credentials, just the endpoint that you need to use. And then, or you can just put the parameters for those credentials. That will be the best practice. And then you can just change the connection and run it. So it's the way that you can create a job in just few seconds, and you can run that code. And finally, you will be able to have those results for visualization to make some queries. So for instance, here we are using an open search repository to use that data. So it's pretty easy just to use natural language to help to get that as instance. So in general, Q is able to accelerate that process in the data integration part with all the GenAI capabilities for planning, creating jobs, get results, help you with recommendation and troubleshooting as well. Once we have the data there, as you know, data is not just about integration. It's also about to have some foundation models. Like if you have all the information from your faculties, students, then you have a data model. And that data model needs to get consumed. We can consume the data models using visualizations. We can use reports. We can use APIs. We can use multiple applications to consume those data models. But at the beginning, we need to understand those data models. We need to understand what kind of tables we have, what is the data that we have available. So for that, we are introducing Amazon Q in Amazon Redshift as well. And the reason of that is Amazon Redshift is a data warehouse. It's the way that we can process terabytes, petabytes of data in a really quick phase. But then we need to explore that data before get some insights. So we introduced generative SQL. And what is that? So when we are talking about generative SQL, is the way that we can use a GenAI application to generate SQL. But again, it's not just about the code. It's about the what would be the best practice, what would be the security. How do we know that the GenAI application knows our own data and can make the best decision for you? So generative SQL is able to increase that productivity, writing all that code that you need, all the SQL code, but also is able to use your existing permissions. So if a user has permissions over a few tables, Amazon Q is gonna have that permission as well. It's not gonna read just the SQL or the natural language output, but also is able to understand your databases, understand your tables. So it's using the permissions that you have and using the information, the data that has available to write that code is gonna help you to advance in that exploration. So how does it work is we have a web editor that is called Query Editor version 2 from Redshift. We just need to go to the Query Editor and start using the conversational tool. So let's see how it works. So for instance, we have a natural language prompt when we say, hey, just count the number of students that we have in a specific county, and maybe we have less than 100 test takers. So the natural output of the query for that kind of output is just a normal query when you say, okay, select from schools, that could be a table with that information in the district of Alameda. But that's not real. When we are seeing how it looks like in real, it's a query that will need to join multiple tables, will need to know about the values. So when we are using generative SQL, the GenAI application is able to understand the context, understand the tables, understand the data itself, and it's gonna provide you an accurate query that is gonna work for you. So this is another example. What happens when we are asking about some specific value? Let's say a country, let's say a county, a city. So if we are asking like list the product descriptions for specific stations in Czech Republic. So the natural output, we're gonna create a query and it's gonna put a specific value like Czech Republic, but maybe that's not the right value. Maybe in your database, you are using an abbreviation, right? So that acronym is something that is very specific for your business. It's very specific in your site. So Amazon Q is able to understand those specifics to help you to write the accurate query. This is another example. When you are using multiple tables, you are using multiple data, sometimes you have similar names, maybe same column names, and that could create ambiguity. So with generative SQL, is able to understand when you are using different terms, maybe from different contexts, but maybe with the same name. And in that scenario, it's able to create aliases, is able to separate those meanings. So it's gonna create a more accurate query. So let's see a demo about this. So this is the Amazon Redshift Query Editor version 2. To enable generative SQL, we just need to click on that mark and save it. Once we have that, we can start asking questions. Just in that specific conversational tool, we can write some questions. At the beginning, we can start just asking, but we can create a database and we can start working with some tables. So for instance, when we are gonna write a query, we just need to ask, like which state has the most students or venues, different questions, and then we are gonna have an output, and that output is gonna validate your data, is gonna validate your permissions, and finally it's gonna write a query for you. And query is based on the best practices that we need to explore the data. Maybe you don't know the table, maybe you don't know the data, you don't know the columns, but you know what you are looking for. So you can just make a question, and then you are gonna receive a response. What happens if that data, if you don't have permission to that data, it's not gonna work. Remember, the permissions and security is something that is super important. So if you don't have permissions to do it, you cannot do it with Q. But then if you have it, you will be able to access to that data. So in this case, we are gonna see when we have permissions over a specific table. So we have a list of tables here on the left, 7 tables, and we have permissions over there. So we are able to make that query, and now the query could be different. because that query is going to understand those tables, it's going to know what data is available, and based on that, it's going to generate the query, not just about the natural language output. So now we have a different query just because we say, hey, we have 7 tables. You can use those 7 tables. That is the information that I'm looking for. Just write the query and give me the result. And that's it. But that would be a simple query. What about if we need to make some personalization in those queries? We need to get more details. We would like to understand very specific values or questions. So we can say like, which are the top 3? Let me go more details. I would like to know the customer information. I would like to know the student information. We can just iterate in the same chat. So it's like a conversation. And then we are gonna have more results. Another thing is able to understand the specific database, and then it's able to save all those queries. So that will be like a query history when you are able like use the previous interaction that you did to get that insights before. Because sometimes, let's say you have a specific question and the result wasn't enough for you, but you can say, hey, this question is about this specific table. I would like to see this more in detail. When we are saying that I would like to understand the tuition in this kind of scenario, I'm referring to that specific table. You can provide more context. And when you are providing more context, Q is able to save all that context. It's able to save all that query history just for you. So it's not gonna save that query history for everybody, it's just for you. And then you can decide if you want to share that context. You can share that context as well and help your colleagues to avoid interact everything from the beginning. So for instance, in this part, we are saying like, hey, this is a specific query, but then you are using a specific column that is press ID that we don't use that. Just change it. And you can say, please change some of the parameters, change some of the columns that you are using just to have a better query. And here you can start changing databases, you can start changing environments, and depends on the environment that you are using, that will be different query history. So you cannot mix all the informations between databases. At the end, it's like you can have separate domain, you can have separate query history, you can share that query history, and then use just natural language to start exploring all the data that you have available there. There you go. So for instance, this is the same natural language prompt that we did before, but with a different output just because we changed database. So what about if we have some issues? Sometimes you are just exploring data and then we don't know what is happening. We have an issue. So we can ask that as well to Q. We can say, hey, please help me to correct this query. Please help me with this information. I don't know what is happening. Maybe I'm lacking a permission, or maybe I just have a syntax error. So Q is able to help with that as well. It's able to correct your queries. It's able to correct the information that you needed. It's not just about read data. It's able to update that data. So if you need to modify something, Q is able to suggest that as well and help you to modify in a really good way without any mistake. Sometimes you know that we delete some data, we updated some data by error. Q is able to notify you if you are gonna modify the database and create a warning for you. Let's see that. So for instance, in this case, what about if we would like to delete some table? So we would like to just have the query to delete a specific table. Q is able to provide the information, but it's gonna create a warning for you. Like this specific query is gonna modify your database. Please take care. It doesn't mean that you are able to do it. You need to have permissions to do it. So if you run that query and you don't have permission, it's not gonna work. But at least Q is gonna warn you about that specific statement. So let's see an example. For instance, we want to insert some data. We want to create a new table or insert new rows. you are gonna see a specific warning because it's gonna modify your database. You can run it, and once you run that query, you will need permissions. So you just need to use the Add to Notebook button. You're gonna have the query ready to run. And if you don't have permissions, again, you're gonna have an error like that, permissions denied. So that's important. It's the way that can help you with all the query statement to solve issues, to iterate in some queries, to have that query history, to have better answers, but still respect your security about all the data that you have in that database. All the learnings about troubleshooting, query history, context is able uh, to be shared across users. So you can just, with a specific option about this specific statement, you can use that to share that query history, that context across users. For instance, in this case, we are gonna say, hey, let's share those permissions with the user two. The user two is just another person who has never interacted with Amazon Q in Redshift, but then all the learnings that we saw before about create more detail, more specific columns, to provide more context is gonna be shared with that specific user. So once we grant that permissions, that new user just need to log in. So let's use a different user, the user two. And that user now will be able to use Amazon Q as well, but reusing the existing context learnings from the user one. And that helps a lot because sometimes if it's the same area, same team, everybody's talking about the same terms, everybody's looking almost the same data. So it's gonna help any user from that team to get better insights. So for instance, in this case, that we would like to know the top sales of that specific county. If you see the column of phrase byte, now it's right. We don't need to ask you again that that's not the current column because the user one already did that. So the user two is just reusing that information, reusing that context, having a result. And those queries can be very complex. Sometimes we don't care about the query, right? We just need to ask the natural language question and then see if the results are the result that we are expecting, or just providing more natural language prompts. And with that, we can have a better output. To maximize all the benefits that we have here, I always recommend to iterate in the conversational tool. If we saw bad results because maybe the question is not very concise, which is not a problem, you can just iterate many times that you want, and Q is gonna learn about that. So next time it's gonna just respond or give you the answer just with the first question. So the recommendation here is always, if you have an error, if you have a specific output that maybe is not the output that you are expecting, just continue iterating because Q is gonna learn just for that specific user, just for that specific group, and then you can share those learnings. Okay, so now we have all the data ready, and we have Q not just for create the data integration part, but also to understand how to use the data, what are my values, how can join those tables. Sometimes we don't know what are the relationships between tables, between entities. Q is gonna help us with all that information. We just need to ask. Q is gonna make all the relationship for us. It's gonna create those joins. It's gonna create everything related with that data to provide that output, and it's gonna learn as well. And finally, we can share the results. We are ready to go with the consumption part. We want to consume the data, not just about queries, not just about code, but then start creating, getting insights with a visualization tool. We can move forward with QuickSight. So, Steve, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Carlos. Appreciate that. And so now that we've taken a look at how generative AI can help us kind of get our data ready for an end user situation, let's take a look at what our BI tool, Amazon QuickSight, and show you just how it can be put into practice here. And so, okay, 1 second, folks. How many people here actually use a BI tool, business intelligence tool like Tableau, Power BI, something like that? Just about everybody. Okay, anybody familiar with Amazon QuickSight? Couple people. Okay, great. So yeah, and so what we're looking at here in Amazon QuickSight is kind of a typical student enrollment dashboard. You know, we've got some machine learning insights up top that are going to act as narratives for the dashboard itself. And then, of course, we've got our interactive visuals down below here with the Sankey diagram showing student cohort and major, and then our quarterly enrollment trend down here. But what we found over the years is typically it doesn't matter how well built or how well designed your dashboard is. As soon as you roll it out to your end users, what happens? You get questions, right? Can you change this? Can you do that? And so whatever your system is for taking in those requests, is it email or maybe it's Jira and a ticketing system, those start to pile up, right? And it's not like we all don't have our own day jobs anyway. And now we have all these requests coming in around changing dashboards. So it gets frustrating for the people building dashboards. It's also a little frustrating for the end users as well, right? Because they have questions they want answered. So the first kind of main component of QuickSight is Q&A, or QuickSight Q, I should say, is Q&A. So what we've enabled Q to do within QuickSight is just answer any questions that our end users have right away. And so now you can see as soon as I click into the Q question bar, Q actually scans the data and comes up with a list of suggested questions that I might be able to use. One of the first things that people say to us is, you know, we've enabled this, but people don't know where to start. So Q is going to help with a few prompts. So looking at this dashboard here, I see we have students by state, but I know we have international students as well. So instead of me putting a ticket in or sending a request, now I can just come over here and that's so much harder with one hand. So I can type my request in, and now I'm asking Q to show me, hey, give me the students by country, right? And so instead of me putting a ticket in and waiting or an email, now I get an immediate answer. And so this first graphic here is going to directly answer my question. I asked for students per country. It's broken it out. Now it's going to break out some ancillary data for me as well, some other supporting data as well. So we have the unique number of students and countries here. And then down below here, we have a data dump as well. Let's see if I can get that. But then we also have our narrative here that's going to give us a description of what's going on, right? So it's going to spell everything out. And as I hover over the text, it actually highlights the actual visual that it's pertaining to. Now, if I know I want to come back to this visual, or maybe have it request have it built in the future, I can actually save this to my personal pinboard. And so I can save up to 32 different visuals on my personal pinboard. And the great thing is these are interactive, or I should say dynamic. So as data is updated, even though I've saved these visuals to my pinboard, they will be updated too. So we will always get the latest information. So that's one aspect of QuickSight Q. The next is building reports. So we call them data stories. Now you can build an executive summary as well. So for instance, if you just need to send an executive summary of the dashboard off to a provost, you can build that out, send it off in an email. But these data stories are where we're going to get a little bit more of a detailed report. And so the stories are designed to build off of the dashboard itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select the, let's see here. We're going to select the visuals that we want to use. And we're going to ask Q, if you can hold this in, to build a story around So as you can see here, I just typed in natural language, build me a story around how we can increase enrollment in the United States and internationally. And it's going to start to build a report for me. And so one of the things I like to mention when we're waiting for this to build, we're just going to take a minute, is again, we view generative AI as a way to assist humans with work, not replace them. So this is completely editable and should be edited before it's sent out, actually. So as you can see here, we have the beginnings of our story, unlocking enrollment growth, a data-driven approach. We have our introduction here, and if we were reading through it, you could see that it's using our data. Let me close that out. We have the Sankey diagram that we were looking at in the dashboard. It is still interactive. We have a section detailing cost per course, our quarterly enrollment, our test scores, students by state. And then down here, we have some integrated insights, an enrollment growth roadmap, call to action, and even a conclusion already built out for us. And so I was actually working with a gentleman on the East Coast who has a responsibility for building a report or for sending a report every month to the president of the university around alumni donations and internships, companies that provide internships to the students at their school, and then how many of those students actually get hired. And he was telling me this is a quarterly report that almost takes him an entire quarter to build every month because he has to go out and gather the data. I showed him this and he about fell out of his chair. He's been using this now. And so this report that used to take him almost a full quarter takes him less than a day now. So he's been using this and loving it. And we are actually working on getting him to write a reference with us. We're going to write a blog about it. But that is kind of the user experience. So let me pause here. I know Carlos and I have thrown a lot of information at you here during our time, and I know our time is just about up. But yeah, I thought maybe I would pause here for any questions anyone might have or comments. Yes, sir. Let me pass this.
Does it require that you have metadata in your relationship anyway? So in other words, let's say venue has a field named ABC and have no metadata. Will it scan the values to try to infer which is the field related thing? Like how properly?
Yeah, there is no requirement to have like a previous tags or metadata or like try to provide more information to those tables. It's just the table itself, the basic definition. And Q is able to scan that data, scan the values. Obviously, if that user who is using Q has the right permissions to do it, because if you don't have permissions, Q is not able to write that data. So once you have permission of that specific tables, data models, blah, 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 it's able to scan the specific metadata from the table itself, but also scan the values and understand the context. So at the beginning, could understand very well the context, but sometimes if cannot, because sometimes we have a lot of abbreviation in those values, we can just provide in context just using natural language, like, hey, this value means that kind of things. And then next time it's gonna use the query history, so you don't need to specify again the same thing. That's amazing. Yeah, if you already have naming convention, that will help a lot because just with that specific naming convention is gonna understand very well, to be honest, what is happening. But then again, you can provide more context and you can share that context and those learning with other users to avoid that repetition for everybody.
I don't know, maybe we have a lot of different applications that are more abstract rather than generalized, like a country habilitation. Adding to that question, I was thinking in the long term how this can be fine-tuned so that say you answer and that you can connect to kind of understand what the concept is. But there are some fields that have much more abstract habilitations, which are which are a group of like 1 to 2 units, and in such context, how does Google or other platforms help us to kind of fine tune it and let it go, one go, like set it up for the entire enterprise, rather than just I was wondering if there's any functionalities that kind of fine tune this as a free hand to onboarding.
Yeah. So there are multiple options, to be honest. Like one option could be just using natural language to provide that context, but I know if it is like a 1,000 values, it won't be effective. So sometimes we have experiences with customers when they just have a dictionary table, like a specific table to say all the abbreviation and the meanings. And then Q is able to use that table to make that relationship with other tables as well. Another way is we have using generative AI in almost all the AWS services. So we have a data governance service right now that is called Amazon Data Zone, and that service is able to understand as well those values and sometimes make that abstraction for you, and then you can use in Redshift as well. So there are multiple options. It's just the way to provide that context to Q, because at the beginning you're right, Q is not going to interpret everything because it's very specific for your business, for your organization. But then if you have a way using natural language or maybe using existing table or using a data governance tool, we can provide that context and we can reuse that context in many phases. So we can elaborate more about that in a follow-up meeting as well. Any other question? And
Well, then I think we're at time. So thank you all very much for attending today. I hope this has been useful. Appreciate your time.